Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to our, is this only our second Zoom seminar?
I think so.
It is, I know, but it feels like we're Zooming all the time. So, welcome to our second Zoom seminar for the year. I'm very pleased to introduce Mady, who, of course, for most people needs no introduction. He's a professor here at Macquarie in Applied Linguistics, and Mady came to us as an associate professor originally in 2009. Since that time, he's supervised research of many postgraduate and doctoral students and published a substantial number of books, both authored and co-authored, journal articles, book chapters, etc., on a range of topics in the field. And today he's going to talk about something that we all have to grapple with, which is journal publication productivity, impact and quality. Thank you, Mady. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Linda, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. And I hope you're all keeping well and staying safe in these times. Yesterday, I had a couple of Zoom meetings, and there was some disruptions due to unstable internet. I hope this doesn't happen today, but if it does, please bear with me and don't leave the room, because I should be able to connect with my mobile and then continue the presentation. Okay, let me share my screen and start the presentation and make use of my, can you see the screen now? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, the topic of my presentation is scholarly productivity, impact and quality among applied linguistics, TESOL academics in the group of 8 Australian universities. And the motivation actually for this study is that in addition to my areas of interest and the regular research and writing that I'm doing, I'm recently interested in conducting some trend studies. And I see the purpose of these trend studies to find out what's going on and what trends are we able to find in particular areas. So some of these trend studies is, for example, we did an analysis of the empirical research in the Journal of Second Language Writing over its 25th year of publication, and it was published in the Journal of Second Language Writing in 2018. The other trend study that I have been involved in and have completed is analysis of empirical articles published in the Journal of English for academic purposes, so again, over its lifespan. And this has been submitted and is currently under review. And the other one is a research we are doing on research methodology in TESOL, again, a trend study. And in this study, we are reviewing and analyzing 696 empirical articles published in the Journal of TESOL Quartile over its lifespan. And the one that I'm going to present today is a little bit different from the previous ones, because the previous ones were mostly related to the analysis of published empirical articles. But this one actually is related to journal article productivity, impact and quality among applied linguistics and TESOL academics in group of 8 universities. And the incentive for this one actually was that when I was applying for level E at Macquarie University and I was preparing my case, I was curious to find out how other colleagues at my level actually have been performing in terms of research. And I searched and I couldn't find anything except for some Google Scholar, indices. So I was inspired actually to find out what similar colleagues are doing actually in other, organizations. So this topic actually relates to the discourse of academic evaluation and in particular the jargons that are nowadays used in academia, mostly to establish a discourse of academic evaluation among academics and other stakeholders. And these jargons are productivity, which refers to number of articles, impact, which refers to citation index, and quality, which refers to both journal article impact factor as well as the quartile of the journals. And these key performance indicators are used to assess academic works at the individual academic faculty, at the individual department, faculty, and institution levels. At the individual level, these key performance indicators are used as part of evaluating academics for employment, for workload, for promotion, and for grant applications. At the department and faculty level, these key performance indicators are used to rank the departments and faculties. For example, the Excellence in Research for Australia ERA exercise is currently assessing the impact at the discipline level using these key performance indicators, which include productivity, impact, and quality, as well as peer review, I think. At the institutional level, these key performance indicators are usually used in institutional strategic evaluation and planning, as well as part of university rankings by international ranking organizations such as Times Higher Education, QS, and Shanghai. So what does these key performance indicators imply for academics? So for academics to fulfill the evaluation practices, including job requirement, promotion, grant application, and so on, academics are required to be prolific and productive by increasing the number of their publications proportionate to their academic level. So as Lee observed, the notion of publish or perish is more intricate and problematic than it suggests, because even though academics do publish, they may still perish in the system if their publications do not meet the requirements laid down by their universities. So academics need to be concerned about where they publish their research, as well as the quality aspect of the publish or perish game. As such, academics are required to not only increase the number of their publications, which represent the quantity or the productivity, but also to publish with and in recognized outlets, which refer to the quality of their published materials. Just as a case in point, I'm sure most of you are familiar with a recent case at UTS, which happened in March. University of Technology Sydney fired a BEAST academic for not meeting research publication targets. The university sacked the academic after 14 years service for not meeting its requirement for publishing a specified number of articles, that is quantity, in top-tier journals, that is quality. Of course, this case was defeated. The UTS Appeals Commission overruled this, stating that, among other points, research accounted for only 40% of the academic's time, and that the case was okay on the rest of the workload parts. And therefore, they decided that it is difficult to conceptually and rationally conclude that a 60% performance rating equated to poor or unsatisfactory performance overall. On a positive side, colleagues in the department and faculty are aware of our recent recent Dean Townhouse speech, who raised some awards, and among these awards actually was Publication of the Year award. And I'm sure that this is also the trend in many other Australian universities, as well as overseas and in other universities across the globe. And a parenthetical interjection, it's my understanding that universities are creeping towards a GG policy in addition to their current PP, publish or perish policy. And so academics need to be more vigilant. And I'm curious if you can guess actually what GG, which I have coined, stands for. Can anybody guess?
No idea.
No idea. Yeah, that's grant or grave. So the problem statement actually, given the university's publish or perish and GG policy, there is a paucity of research on the assessment of the scholarly productivity more generally and as relates to applied linguistics, TESOL academics in Australia more specifically. To fill this gap, this study was initiated to investigate the trend of journal article productivity, impact, and quality among applied linguistics TESOL academics in the group of 8 Australian universities as a reference group. And in my search in 2016, as I was looking for, some references, I came across actually a similar one in psychology conducted by McNally. And so that was a good model for me to follow. The research team, 2 colleagues from Macquarie University Library, Heather Coop and Gray Calvi, I don't know whether they are present in today's seminar or not, but they helped a lot in order to collect the data. And so the purpose of this study was to investigate the research performance indicators among Australian applied linguistics TESOL academics in Geo-8 universities on journal article productivity, which relates to quantity, as well as academic impact and journal quality, both refer to quality, over 19 years, 2000 to 2018 inclusive. One of the reasons that we focus on the first 2 decades of the 21st century was that academic publishing has been the fastest growing media sub-industry in the last decade based on the reference that I have provided. And so the first 2 decades of 20th century will be a good context to gauge scholarly productivity and academic impact among this cohort of academics. The research questions, we posed 3 research questions. Number 1, what is the overall trend of journal article productivity among this group of academics in group of 8 universities as relates to their academic level and gender? And what is the overall impact citation patterns of the published articles across academic level and gender again? And what is the quality of the journals in which this cohort of academics published the papers? For those who might not know, the first 8 universities created in Australia organized themselves into a self-defined group in 1999, and they were called as a group of 8 universities. And these group of 8 universities include the Australian National University, Monash University, the University of Adelaide, the University of Melbourne, the University of New South Wales, the University of Queensland, the University of Sydney, and the University of Western Australia. Now, the group of 8 proportion of world-leading research is twice that of the rest of the sector. And the group accounts for more than half of the Australian research papers with international collaboration. The group also invests 3.2 billion annually in applied research and experimental development based on the reference that I have provided. So these facts make group of 8 universities a good sample to study as a reference group and perhaps for comparison purposes. I should, however, clarify here that no representative claim can be made about Applied Linguistics TESOL Academics scholarly performance just based on a limited study like the one that I'm presenting. How did we define Applied Linguistics TESOL? We used Baldoff and Kaplan's 2010 main areas of applied linguistic research as our criteria to select and include academics and their journal articles. Accordingly, areas such as translation and interpreting were not included since they were not listed in Baldoff and Kaplan's list, perhaps because this area of research is now a distinct and autonomous field of study, although it clearly links well with applied linguistics. Also, the data set includes only applied linguistics TESOL as it relates to the English language and not other languages other than English or indigenous languages. In light of the above criteria, we might say that applied linguistics is used in its narrow definition and one co-badged with teaching English to speakers of other languages. TESOL. There were a lack of, as we started actually to collect data and prepare our data file, it was found that there is a lack of consistency across the 8 universities regarding where applied linguistics TESOL is homed. And there were variations, as we'll see, at the department, school, and faculty levels. Overall, however, we were able to identify 65 applied linguistics TESOL academics in these universities. Of these 65 academics, 60% were female and 40% were male. The data sources, all the 65 applied TESOL academics were represented in our data file in terms of their surname, their first name, institution, department, faculty, apparent gender, academic position, and a link to the department faculty research online profiles. And for each academic, a productivity and impact record profile was also created, including article title, journal title, volume, issue, year, total citation count for each article over the period, as well as a record of the impact factor and the quartile of the journals in which they published. Overall, as you can see, 741 articles were found to have been published by these 65 academics over 2000 to 2018 in 243 journals. And we were able to identify journal impact factors, citations, and quartiles of these journals. Again, for those who might do not know what quartile stands for, journal quartile is represented by Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. A Q1 first quartile indicates that the journal is in the top 25% of its subject area or field, while the Q4 fourth quartile indicates that the journal is in the bottom 25% of the journal list in that area or field. The JCR of Web of Science and SJR of Scopus, best quartile for each of the journals were used to determine the quartile of the journals. And also included was an indication as to whether journal appeared on the 2018 Excellence Era journal list or no. Okay, all these data were collected and saved in an Excel file for data organization, thanks to Heather and Gray. If I can actually open to just give you a glimpse of how the Excel file actually looks like. So we can see that here we have got institution, we have got surname, first name, and we have got apparent gender, position, department, faculty, Scopus ID, index for all years, and index for publications, and journal title, and so on and so forth. So we have got all these information for the 741 articles. Okay, relevant analysis were conducted on this Excel file to answer the research questions. And so I will present the results related to institutional home of Applied Linguistics TESOL program academics. Overall journal article publication trend, journal article productivity across gender and academic rank, citation patterns across academic rank, and quality and impact factors of the journals in which this cohort of academics published their papers. Okay. Now, as relates to the institutional home of this cohort of academics, as I mentioned in the introduction, there was diversity and variation. I think it was only at University of Adelaide that this group of academics were homed in a school of education in the Faculty of Arts. In other universities, as we can see, actually, they were dispersed in different schools and sometimes even in different faculties as well. So in Australian National University, they were homed in a School of Cultural History and Language, as well as a School of Literature, Language and Linguistics. Both of these schools under Australian National University College of Asia and the Pacific. Whereas, for example, in the University of Melbourne, some of these colleagues were in School of Language and Linguistics on the Faculty of Arts, and some others were in Melbourne Graduate School of Education. Again, in Monash University, some were based in the School of Languages, Literatures, Cultures and Linguistics, and some in the School of Humanities and Languages, both under Faculty of Arts, and some in Faculty of Education. University of Queensland, we had some in the School of Language and Cultures in Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, and some in the School of Education. In University of Sydney, as you might be more familiar with, some in Department of Linguistics, some in the School of Education and Social Work, and both of these on the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. University of Western Australia, they were based in the School of Social Sciences under Faculty of Arts, Business, Law and Education. And in University of New South Wales, they were in the School of Education as well as the School of Humanities and Languages under the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. Okay. As relates to the overall pattern of productivity article publication, as you can see, actually, I have this graph that starts from 2000 to 2008. And as you can see, this pattern actually shows an increasing pattern, although with some ripples here and there. The main ripple occurred around 2013 to 2015. And then it seems that actually the rate of publication is decreasing. However, based on the regression line that I have for this graph. And the positive slope, it means that this is temporally, and therefore, again, it gets up and goes up. And therefore, the trend is an increasing trend, starting with low publications early in the first decade of 21st century. And as we move ahead, actually, the rate of publications increases. Now, let's have a look at some breakdown of these publications. Now, from this table, you can see the total number of academics at each level. So we had 23 at the lecturer level, 12 at senior lecturer, 14 at associate professor, and 16 at professor level, altogether 65. And then you can see how many of these actually were male and how many were female. And then the number of publications per gender. Now, a couple of columns that is worth looking at is the total number of article publication. As you can see, for lecturers, actually it was 136, for senior lecturer 137, for associate professor 173, and for professor 295. So it shows an increasing pattern from lecturer to professor. But more importantly, is average number of article production or publication per academic. So this is more revealing, and again, the trend is more vivid as we move from lecturer to full professor, and you can see that is actually increasing. Another area that we can look at, although in almost all ranks, female colleagues had more publication than male colleagues, but at associate professor level, it's interesting because the number of female colleagues were lower than male colleagues, 6 compared to 8. But they had more publications, 103 compared to 70 of male colleagues. Related to citation pattern, again, what we have got in this table is we have got the number of articles based on the academic ranks and then the number of citations. Again, we can see actually that the number of citations increases as we move from lecturer to professor. And again, this is more represented in the average number of citations per article that we have 6.98 for lecturer, but 19.10 for professors. So implicitly, perhaps, the more article, the more citations. And then 2 tables, fewer than 10 citation and more than 10 citations. Again, I think this column is more revealing because it shows that, again, citations are increasing for the level for papers with 10 citations or more as we move from lecturer to full professor. Okay. Summary of the results up to this point. There is diversity of an institutional home for Applied Linguistics TESOL Academics in group of 8 universities. They are dispersed in different schools and faculties. And the second result is that female staff outnumbered male staff in group of 8 universities. Of the 65 academic staff in group of 8 universities, 60% actually were female and 40% were male. This was while 67% of the female staff were at the lecturer and senior lecturer levels, and only 33% were at the associate and full professor levels. And the trend was reversed for male staff. That is, despite a fewer number, only 35% were at the lecturer and senior lecturer levels, while 65% were at the associate and full professor levels. The other finding was there is an increasing trend of journal article publication by Applied Linguistics TESOL staff in a group of 8 universities over the 19 years, perhaps alluding to the publish or perish policy. And the number of publications was proportionate to the academic level. That is, there is an increasing trend of journal article publication as we move from lecturer to professor level. This trend was also observed with regard to the average number of citations per article, except that associate professors showed a higher average citation index compared to professors. However, articles that received more than 10 citations followed a steady increase from lecturer to professor. Okay. Now let's shift to the impact factor of the journals. Of the total 741 articles published by Applied Linguistics TESOL Academics in the group of 8 universities, 539 articles, about 73%, were published in journals with a reported impact factor by 2017 JCR Journal Impact Factor. And 202 articles, about 27%, were published in journals with no JCR reported impact factor. The minimum and maximum reported impact factors were 0.115, which belong to the Journal of Across Languages and Cultures, and 5.847, which belong to Internet and Higher Education. The mode for impact factor of the journals was 1.039, the median was 1.195, and the mean impact factor was 1.409, with a standard deviation of 0.84. Okay, let's have a look at this table. As you remember, I mentioned that these academics published their articles in 243 journals. And we used two best quartile indices, one belonging to JCR and the other one to SJR. According to JCR, almost 50% of these articles were published in Q1 and Q2 journals. And about 27% of articles were published in journals that were not ranked by JCR. And about 23%, 23% of the articles were published in Q3 and Q4 journals. I can say that SJR was more lenient as relates to the ranking of the journals. And as you can see, actually, according to SJR, about 90% of the articles were published in Q1 and Q2 journals. And only 4% were considered unranked, and about 5% in Q3 and Q4. In addition to journal impact factor and quartile indices, Excellence in Research Australia ERA has also created a journal list of the 243 journals in which Applied Linguistics TESOL Academics publish articles. 159 journals, that is around 65%, were listed on ERA's 2018 journal list. However, 84 journals, around 35%, were not listed on ERA's 2018 journal list. So we can say that actually ERA list is stricter compared to JCR and SJR, best quartile indices. However, ERA's list with almost 35% of the journals unlisted is closer to the JCR unmarked journals, which had 27% as unmarked. It was interesting to see which journals actually received the highest number of publications, and therefore, based on the ranking that we did, this is a list of 17 journals that had a publication of 10 articles or more. Asian Englishes and Assessing Writing each received 10 article publication by this cohort of academics, and journals like Journal of Pragmatics received 40 articles or published 40 articles over the time period. And then you can have a list of other journals like Australian Review of Applied Linguistics, Language Testing, Australian Journal of Linguistics, TESOL Quarterly, and so on and so forth, with different numbers of articles that they publish. And you can see the quartile of these journals, a combination of Q1 and Q2, only one. Of course, again, there is a difference between whether we look under JCR or SJR. Interestingly, as you can see, Australian Journal of Linguistics is ranked Q3 by JCR, but Q1 by SJR. And these are the impact factors of these 17 journals. Okay. Another interesting finding was the top 5 journals in terms of impact factor in which Applied Linguistics and TESOL Academics in group of 8 universities published their articles. These 5 journals ordered by impact factor are Journal of Second Language Writing with an impact factor of 3.324, Applied Linguistics with an impact factor of 3.225, Language Teaching Research with an impact factor of 2.86, TESOL Quarterly with an impact factor of 2.256, and finally, Assessing Writing with an impact factor of 1.906. Now, let's move on to some observations and reflections on these analysis and results. The first observation is that there is variation in where Applied Linguistics and TESOL Academics are homed. Applied Linguistics and TESOL Academics are mostly homed in a school, in Faculty of Arts. That was an observation from 5 universities, and in other faculties in 3 other universities. So the other observation is that Applied Linguistics and TESOL Academics in group of 8 universities published in 243 journals, and almost 27% were unranked, according to JCR JIF Best Quartile list. This diversity, both in institutional home as well as number of journals, can risk the disciplinarity, and professionalism of Applied Linguistics and TESOL, and may thus be a cause for concern for this cohort of academics. The other observation and reflection is that there was an increasing trend of journal article publication by Applied Linguistics TESOL staff in group of 8 universities over the 19 years, alluding to the rule of the game, publish or perish. So I was wondering how this trend might affect more traditional types of publications in this field and more broadly in human sciences, such as edited volumes, book chapters, conference proceeding papers, and so on. The other observation is that of the 65 Applied Linguistics TESOL academic in group of 8 universities, 60% were female and 40% were male. This resulted in more article publications by female academics compared to their male colleagues. And in fact, in 3 academic ranks, lecturer, senior lecturer, and associate professor, female academics were more prolific than their male counterparts. However, 67% of female staff were at the lecturer and senior lecturer levels, and only 33% were at the associate and full professor levels. The trend was reversed for the male staff. That is, only 35% were at the lecturer and senior lecturer levels, while 65% were at the associate and full professor levels. The question is this trend because female academics are more modest in applying for promotion, or as Lillis and Carey 2018 observed, they are assuming more mentoring, service, and administration work, and thus not having time to prepare for and apply for promotion. In any case, what implication can this finding have for promotion mechanisms? I mean, perhaps there should be a mechanism that automatically or somewhat automatically look at, academic performance and therefore go for promotion rather than asking individuals to apply for it. Now, this study actually has some limitations. The first is that we relied exclusively on journal article publications. I'm sure that Applied Linguistics and TESOL Academics commonly publish books, monographs, and edited volumes, book chapters, and papers in conference proceedings. So a complete portrait of scholarly productivity, impact, and quality will therefore need to include other types of publications if you want to give a more comprehensive picture. Second, we relied on the publicly available database to measure research productivity over the period 2000-2018. While we did our best to gather the data as comprehensively and accurately as possible, errors might have occurred in the identification of academics and estimation of productivity. An alternative approach would be to use surveys and collect data directly from individual academics if a similar study is to be replicated, perhaps in other contexts. The third limitation of the present study is that we focused only on the group of 8 universities in Australia. The discipline of Applied Linguistics and TESOL is located in almost all Australian universities, so a more comprehensive study may aim at replicating the present study at a larger scale, including all universities with Applied Linguistics and TESOL programs. And the fourth limitation of the present study is that we use citation data as the only measure of scholarly impact. There is controversy over the usefulness of this measure as a research quality index, drawing on Hollinet, Acknes, Langfeld, and Waters, considered plausibility, originality, and scientific value as 3 dimensions of research quality and alternatives for mere citation of the articles. They added that recently studies have added societal value, that is, including the importance for society as a 4th dimension of research quality. They then argue that from citation counts alone, one cannot reveal why a specific paper is repeatedly cited by other researchers. So further studies may include other measures of impact in addition to citations as was used in the study. Thank you very much for your time and for listening. A paper actually from this research is submitted to the Australian Review of Applied Linguistics and has gone through 2 rounds of review and will hopefully be published soon. Thank you. Now let me stop my share screen and get to question and answer part of the presentation.
Thank you for that, Mady. That was really interesting. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I have some.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in if you don't mind.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Mehdi. It's a really interesting study. I mean, you really pack so much information. I can't get my head around all of it, but one thing really grabbed my attention, and that was the slide you showed of the rate of publications across the 19 years.
Yeah.
And at 2000, it was so low. I mean, it was unbelievably low. I
That's
can't
right.
imagine, I just can't imagine 65 academics at G of 8 not having dozens of publications, but it looked like they hardly had any. And this, so that's one question, but this
Sorry,
got me think.
can I answer this? As I mentioned, actually, publishing journal articles is not recent, but I would say actually it's something that has attracted attention recently and has been emphasized more. So perhaps, I'm not sure, this is just you know, a guess, that perhaps prior to 2000, we can see more book chapters, conference papers, edited volumes, you know, other types of publications. But it's from 2000 on that we can see an increasing you know, pattern in journal article publication. So it would be interesting actually to look for some reasons as to why this might have been so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that. Those thoughts. I was considering that as well, but it got me thinking. Actually, these 65 academics across 19 years, some of them would be featuring as lecturers, and then senior lecturers, associate professors, and then professors across that span. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So you've got a total of 65 people, but they appear in different years in different categories.
That's right.
So in your paper that's under review, have you?
That's actually very interesting. That? Exactly a point that another reviewer actually raised.
Okay.
So, yeah. You were not the reviewer, were you?
No, no, just like-minded.
Yeah, like-minded. Yeah, exactly. That's
he couldn't tell you if he was, could he?
I'd have to kill him.
Yeah, thanks, John. Actually, yes, there has been a transition from level to level, and so that's another perhaps, and I think we have added that to the limitation of this study as well. So it would be interesting actually to somehow try to collect data on you know, academics within a particular ranks and see how their, you know, publications might change as they move from one rank to the other. But yeah, in this article and presentation, yes, that has not been considered.
Yeah, because I'm thinking the profiles of your participants, if you could provide more detail, and we could see, you know, it could be that there are a few that are super prolific at every stage, and they're impacting a lot on the overall statistics for each category. And then some who are, well, if you have 65, I'm just thinking at lecturer level, I mean, is there space for new people to come in, or everybody had to be in place 19 years ago in 2000?
So perhaps we can say actually that at the level of lecturer, that's what we get. So since no new addition actually would it? I'm trying to think whether there is a rank that would not be added to. Certainly higher ranks actually would be added to, because we have got you know, lower ranks. But perhaps the I'm not sure, but perhaps a lecture would be something that we can consider more stable than the other ranks. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I'll let other people ask better questions.
Yeah.
Mehdi, I've got a question if no one else will.
Yeah, John, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting
Pleasure.
indeed. My question is about the higher numbers of publications as you go up the levels.
Yes.
And is that, I was just wondering, is that how do you count them? So do you count them like if do you count them at the level they were at when they published the paper, or the level they were at when you looked at the data? Because
yeah, this is more or less the same question that Stephen actually raised.
Okay.
No, the way that actually we have counted is that we just look at the time that we collected data was over 2017 and 2018. So whoever was in any of those categories actually was considered at that ranked level.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So really, I mean, in that case, the findings tell you the findings tell you that a professor has more publications than a level B person, but the professor presumably has, you know, another 10, 15, 20 years on their career than a level B person.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is something actually that I have explained in the paper, that this could relate to the time academics are at university, and then assumably the more they are in their position, the more publication they will have. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Is that what you were thinking?
That was the question.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Great.
Thanks.
Good to see you. Yeah.
I thought I'd just say hi. You can see I'm interested for work. So.
Thank you. That's all right. Nowadays.
Can I ask a question about the citations?
Yes.
So, as I understand it, what you did with the citations was you counted the number of citations on each paper, right? And that was the data that you worked with. Yes,
of course. The whole data collection were done by Heather and Gray.
You plural, you the team.
They actually refer to the data sources where they could get citations for any of these articles.
So that raised a question in my mind that you've probably thought of, but maybe you can share with us, and that is, what's changed in the background about the number of citations a paper gets? So, for example, has the number of citations of everything increased over the last 20 years? My guess would be that it has, because there are more journals, and so the more journals there are, the more papers there are, perhaps more exposure there is. So something published later may have the opportunity to get more citations just because the baseline has changed. The other thing is, if something was published a long time ago, maybe it has the opportunity to get more citations because it's been out there longer. So I just wondered sort of how, when something was published, might have affected the number of citations it was possible to get.
I think actually it's a tricky thing to look at, because I believe that there are different factors that might affect that. One thing might be that colleagues refer to each other publication for good or for bad. I mean that's usually a trend because they are familiar with each other's publication. The other thing is that since you said that if an article has been published earlier, it might get more citation. On the other hand, people might think that they need to have more recent, resources, and therefore go to more recently published articles rather than go to, more obsolete ones, unless it is a hallmark in the field that they would like to cite. So it's really an interesting question to find out what causes academics to cite a work, and why some articles might get more cited than the others. But no, we didn't touch on this, and it's a good question perhaps for future research to find some ways of learning what factors affect the number of citations of particular articles. But for the time being, I think the general impression is that it's worth that. So it has a quality. And this is, of course, a source of controversy, as I mentioned in reflections and observations. But this is the common belief now, that if an article gets cited, and especially if it gets more and more cited, then there is value in it, and there is quality on the reported research.
I can't hear.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, just I've lost the sound. Is anyone else? Is it me or is it Mehdi?
Mehdi?
Yes.
Yeah, you can't.
Oh, sorry, no, I just lost the sound there for a moment. I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Mehdi?
Yes. Can I have a question?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mehdi, for a very nice presentation. I've got a couple of points here, but the one that is most related to your presentation was about the citations. I understand that the famous people usually get more citations than the authors that are less known and have, weaker voices. How could you deal with that?
This is somehow related to the question raised by Jill, and so when we say that more famous authors or researchers get more published, so indirectly we are saying, or perhaps we can think that the fame actually comes from the research and the quality of the work that they have done. Otherwise, colleagues might not be interested in how the person looks like, or things like that. So we can relate the more citation to more figures or higher figures in any field because of the quality of the work that they have done. But this is an impression and an interpretation. But again, as I responded to Jill, I think we need more research to find out exactly what actually causes citation. I just noticed that Ingrid shared with us an article on the conditions of authority in academic publics, Journal of Sociolinguistics. So that would be certainly a good source to check and to thank you, Ingrid, for sharing that with us. Would you like to elaborate on that or saying anything about that publication, Ingrid?
Thank you so much, Mehdi. That's been really, really interesting. I'm kind of really interested in the qualitative aspects of what you've been saying, because, one's into the quantities, of course, and it's so easy to get kind of caught up in the math of it all and in the statistics. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think none of us really understand the algorithms behind impact factors, for instance. Mm-hmm. As the editor of Multilingual, one thing that's been really, really interesting for me to find out was that a journal that has very few issues is much more likely to have a higher impact factor than a journal that has many issues here. So, and there, I think, that was one thing I discovered that I had no idea about, but all these algorithms are actually proprietary. So there is some deus ex machina, some black hole that we don't know about. And although we all pride ourselves in being critical, we just accept these numbers that are out there and then cite them if they suit us and ignore them if they don't. And so I think from my perspective, what is really important is actually to look at the qualitative aspect of questions like academic influence. And I think, as Hamid has pointed out quite recently, I mean, people work under very different conditions of being listened to and being cited. And so even being cited is not necessarily a quality indicator, I think, in many ways. One issue that I think affects many of us is that we know people who speak second language speakers are less likely to get published in international high quality journals. They're less likely to be cited. I mean, you've talked about gender. That's another big issue, I think. That women are less likely to publish in the same quantities and then get cited. And so I think we have all these conditions of how you can achieve authority. And I really enjoyed your presentation, but at the same time, I sort of think there is a lot more in kind of a qualitative perspective to look at. So thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for your comments and insider view as you're editing, journal, and for sure you are much more familiar with these, jargons and the game behind, as you mentioned. It's interesting actually that this line of, discussion is carried out by other people in other countries as well. So as I quoted from Lillis and Curry and other people, they are following the same line of discussion as about, researchers and authors' voice and who gets voice and who might, lose voice in this arena. So it's good that we see actually these things are being discussed, and hopefully the same as now we are moving from the pure impact factor to social impact factor, and see how a particular research project might affect, different people in the society. So hopefully there would be other indices that can give more justice to what people do and how they are represented in, journals and other areas.
Thank you so much, Mady. I would just like to thank everyone for coming along today to our Zoom seminar. I think we had 40 here at the maximum, so another fantastic turnout, and everyone stayed to the end. I think there's 36 left. So yeah, it's been really fantastic. And I would just like to thank Mady again for a really interesting paper. And I love Grandeur Grave. That is so cool.
Okay.
That is the new publish or perish for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Grandeur Grave.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Mady. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. And
Mady, can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Mady,
sorry, just Jo is my recent PhD student, and she's working actually on co-authorship between PhD students and supervisors. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and that is why I want to ask you a question about co-authorship.
Yeah.
I find that in your data, there are still some lecturers, they publish more Q4 and unranked journals, but there are still some professors, they still publish those kinds of journals. But I'm just wondering what if they have already become the supervisors and professors, why do they still publish on Q4 and unranked journals? Is that because they are the co-authors? Maybe their students, they may have not the ability to publish on Q1 or Q2 journals. So
that's a very interesting question, actually, Jo, and I think it's worth searching further and find out whether, and that's possible because I think it's in our database to see to find out whether the papers published in Q4 or unranked journals are co-authored with less experienced, researchers or not. But I can't give you a definite answer at this time because I don't have any data on that, as whether professors also published in Q4 or unpublished, unranked actually journals. But it's a good idea to have a look at.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was just going to add something to that, which is that sometimes people choose to publish in Q3 or Q4 journals because those journals sometimes get to a different audience than the Q1 or Q2 journals. So sometimes the more sort of highfalutin theoretical journals have very high impact factors, journal impact factors, but people you want to get to don't necessarily read that kind of stuff. They read stuff that's more applied. And sometimes that's, certainly in my area, that's the case, that people might go for a lesser ranked journal to get to a population of clinicians or teachers or whatever.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think we shouldn't just be looking at journal impact factor as a way of choosing where's the best place to publish something.
That's right. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, can I, just on that and what Ingrid was saying earlier, I think that's something else that like underpins a lot of these things is that it actually, if you play the game, it actually forces you to do things that aren't necessarily in the best interests of the community or the scholarly community or the production and dissemination of valuable knowledge. So another one, which isn't really related to your data, but similar to what Linda was just saying is, editing volumes, which now doesn't count for anything. So if you want to count, then you don't edit volumes. And if no one edits volumes, then they don't get edited and that knowledge doesn't get distributed. So I think, there's a lot that underlies the statistics, including the algorithms, but also the institutional mechanisms of counting as well.
Exactly. And hopefully, universities can find a way to move towards all other alternatives that can account for, impact rather than just, these statistics and citations and impact factors.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. And see you at our next session.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you.